Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Thank you for convening this important hearing, and good morning to our distinguished panelists. I look forward to your testimonies. Last year brought challenges on a scale few could have imagined. The COVID-19 crisis changed life dramatically for almost every American. Many of our normal activities, such as work, school, spending time with loved ones, moved online to prevent further spread of coronavirus, including hearings of this committee. This generated a significant increase in broadband traffic and appended average internet usage patterns. According to one estimate, broadband traffic increased 51% last year. The good news is that broadband networks in the United States performed well compared to other nations, thanks in part to a light touch regulatory framework that promotes investment in broadband infrastructure. U.S. broadband networks have been able to accommodate the sustained surge in online traffic and bandwidth consumption during the pandemic. For its part, the FCC, under the Trump administration, also took meaningful action to respond to the nation's urgent broadband needs. This included the launch of the Keep Americans Connected pledge, where providers voluntarily committed not to terminate broadband services for any residential or small business consumers because they were unable to pay their bills. The FCC also adopted temporary modifications to existing Universal Service Fund programs to support rising demand for internet services. Along with these measures, the Commission completed the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, Phase 1 auction, which awarded $9.2 billion to providers, including over $495 million to providers in Mississippi to deliver high-speed internet services to 5.2 million unserved homes and businesses across the country. Today's hearing is an opportunity for witnesses to discuss how the FCC and Congress can ensure that winning bidders of the RDOF auction are, in fact, able to meet their build-out obligations and deliver high-speed broadband services as promised. The Bipartisan CARES Act, enacted last March, and the Bipartisan Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, enacted in December, also provided billions of dollars in federal resources to broadband-related programs. Together, these laws directed over $400 million to the FCC to expand access to telehealth services, $98 million to implement the Broadband Data Act, to improve the nation's broadband maps, $1.9 billion to help small rural providers remove equipment from their networks that pose a national security threat, and $285 million to implement my Connecting Minority Communities Act, which provides connectivity assistance to historically Black colleges and universities and minority communities through the newly established Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives at NTIA. These bipartisan laws also provided billions of dollars to the Department of Education in support of remote learning, billions to the FCC to help low-income Americans remain connected, hundreds of millions of dollars to the Department of Agriculture to connect rural areas, and over $1 billion to NTIA to expand broadband to unserved areas and tribal lands. Each of these efforts marked a critical step toward connecting all Americans and closing the digital divide. Importantly, these bipartisan laws include meaningful guardrails to ensure that broadband resources are spent prudently and avoid the mistakes of past stimulus efforts that ultimately led to significant waste, overbuilding, and millions of Americans still left unconnected. Of course, prudent spending starts with accurate broadband maps. Next week will mark 1 year since the Bipartisan Broadband Data Act was signed into law. The Broadband Data Act directs the FCC to collect more precise data about where broadband is available and where it is not, and at what speeds. I'm disappointed that the FCC is now projecting that it will take at least another year to comply fully with this law. I hope witnesses will discuss how the delay in developing new maps will impact the efficacy of existing broadband programs, as well as those created through last year's COVID-19 stimulus. to target resources to unserved areas and communities in need. Coordination and information sharing among federal agencies responsible for administering broadband deployment programs are also essential to expanding availability. My Broadband Interagency Coordination Act was passed on a bipartisan basis and signed into law as part of last year's COVID-19 stimulus package. This will require the FCC, NTIA, and USDA to coordinate the distribution of federal funds for broadband deployment to prevent duplication and other mismanagement. And I thank the chair for acknowledging our mutual interest in this subject matter. I look forward to witnesses discussing how coordination among these agencies can reduce overbuilding of existing public and private broadband investments. I would also point out that recently enacted legislation tasks the Treasury Department, the FCC, states, and localities with administering billions in broadband resources without any safeguards to ensure proper handling of funds. For example, there are no requirements that the Treasury Department coordinate with the FCC or NTIA to prevent subsidized overbuilding, duplication of broadband benefits, and other wasteful spending. I'm sure witnesses will want to discuss how this might impact ongoing efforts to provide universal broadband access. Finally, as most of the broadband resources Congress authorized over the past years remain unspent, I hope witnesses will discuss how we can fund future broadband initiatives most effectively in order to address the remaining disparities in access to quality and reliable communication services throughout the United States. So again, Madam Chair, a very important hearing with very informed witnesses, and I look forward to participating. Thank you, ma'am.